The offseason is officially here. There's a new Houston Texan. What's going on, Seth? How you feeling?
I feel good, man.
You're not the new Houston Texan. That would be fun, though.
Sorry, I check Twitter about once every 3 days, and somebody had just tweeted a photo of Jesus Christ, Seth Payne, and Jack Easterby. I'm trying to figure it all out. I got a little disoriented. I can't tell whether they're taking a shot at me or lauding me. So I'm just gonna leave it and check Twitter again in 3 days.
Let Twitter handle that. Yeah.
I feel good. I feel good about this Christian Kirk trade.
Yeah, man.
It's exactly what I was hoping for, which is the Texans have spent heavily to get some guys at marquee positions in terms of draft picks, in terms of dollars spent, and everything else like that. What they need now is a well-rounded football team, and getting guys like Christian Kirk. Did I say Kirksey already?
No, you didn't. You're doing great.
I didn't? Okay,
yeah.
Wait, let me give me a ding.
Yeah. It's going to be a good day,
because I said
man.
Christian Kirk instead of Kirksey.
You did not. You're good.
Christian Kirk is a guy that, when healthy, has done very well. Mm-hmm. And he's had kind of a rocky road in Jacksonville over the last few years. But you get him on what, as far as we know right now, it's a one-year deal. You give up a seventh-round pick for a guy that was going to get his remaining year of his contract. And I think where the Texans have shown that they're a good place to go on a prove-it deal or a prove-it year, if Christian Kirk can just stay healthy, then A, he can provide us a lot of good football play, hopefully.
Yep.
But B, he can maybe leap board into a contract with the Texans or somebody else, and you're not committed to him for the long term. So I really like this deal on the surface of it. For those of you who don't know, Christian Kirk, very much a slot receiver. Takes 75% of his snaps in the slot. He's 5'11", 200 pounds, not as small as Tank Dell, but not a big guy. He is a slot receiver. So there's still a very good chance that the Texans draft a wide receiver in the first round, but it would probably be somebody who's more of an outside guy.
Yeah, I think that's what people need to know about this. If you're just kind of getting into, and you probably saw that the Texans got Christian Kirk, probably a lot of you did dive into the details. If you didn't, as Seth said, they were about to cut him. He signed one of the most lucrative wide receiver contracts in free agency ever at the time, for nearly $20 million a year. Back when the Jags were going on that spending splurge after Trevor Lawrence's first year, he signed a big deal. Like a lot of big deals like that, the last year is kind of phony money because it's not guaranteed. None of his money is guaranteed right now. So the Jags got to a point where he's been banged up the last couple of years, not worth the money. They need to go in a different direction with some other things. So they're about to cut him. This is a lot like the Joe Mixon trade last year. It's the exact same thing. The Bengals are about to cut Joe Mixon. I'm assuming Nick makes a phone call, or maybe the juke him a seventh-round pick so that it keeps everybody else out of the mix. He doesn't hit free agency or anything like that. And now I think it's in play too, Seth, with Christian Kirk, that they could do with Kirk what they did with Mixon last year, is sign him to like a mini extension just to help with the cap a little bit. You know,
well, I don't know about
$16 million. He's making $16 million this year. It's a big.
No. There needs to be a restructure of some sort, or there probably will be a restructure of some sort. The difference is that his injury history is concerning.
Yeah.
And I wonder exactly what they'll do.
Yeah.
Because I don't think he has as much of a justified reason to expect an extension, but there will be some kind of a tweaking. I get nervous about what the extension might be.
I agree.
I don't want him to sweeten the pot too much.
No, I'm with you. Mixon came in a healthy player who was just a cap casualty. Kirk is a cap casualty who's missed a bunch of games the last 2 years. You touched on something else that I think people need to know, which is, and this is just an opinion of mine, this should affect zero about how they attack the wide receiver position both throughout the rest of free agency, in my opinion, as well as, and certainly not in the draft. If you were of mind, if the Texans are putting their big board together, and it just so happens that guys like Matthew Golden and Luther Burden and Emeka Ibuka are fairly high up the overall big board, they're in the teens somewhere, and the Texans are picking 25, and if one of those guys is there, like, wow, signing Christian Kirk should affect none of how you look at the draft and wide receivers. Zero.
Right. I know. I think with Caserio, and this is not unique to him, I think a lot of teams look at it this way. You want to go into the draft where you don't feel like you have a desperate need to draft for a specific position.
Yes.
Because if you want to draft best player available, go into the draft where you feel like, all right, we don't have a huge deficit at any of these spots, so we can take the best player available, perhaps at multiple needs of position, but it gets you closer to that point where, if you go in, there have been times, there have been times with the Texans where they went into training camp without a single defensive tackle on the roster. So that's the opposite of what you want to be.
Yeah. Don't go to the grocery store hungry. It's a bad idea. You don't think rationally.
That's a really good analogy.
Yeah,
Sean.
That's when I'm at my worst.
Don't go to the grocery store hungry. Don't go to. Don't work in a bar when you're an alcoholic. Any of those things.
Yeah.
Keep yourself away from temptation when you're at your most desperate.
Temptation. That's a good way to put it.
Don't go visit the animal shelter when you're depressed.
Yeah.
Because then all of a sudden you come home with 10 freaking puppies.
Dude, that's a really good one right there.
Yeah.
You and I actually talked about Christian Kirk yesterday. When I saw this trade go down, I'm like, hell yeah, man. 5 hours after Seth and I got done going through the nerdy separation stats that we had in the show yesterday, which I thought were very telling. I think they're good stats. Separation yards at point of catch or incompletion. Basically, how open did the guy get? You had compiled the list from Next Gen Stats of the guys who were either via trade or release or whatever. Christian Kirk was pretty high up that list. The two names that we touched on yesterday, based on where they might fall in price-wise compared to some of these, were Elijah Moore, who was fourth among all these guys. It went Cooper Kupp 1, Chris Godwin 2, Devontae Adams 3, Elijah Moore 4. So Elijah Moore's gotten a lot of separation with some really crappy quarterbacks. And then Christian Kirk was just a couple more guys down after that. Those were the two guys that we kind of zeroed in on, just saying, look, it feels like Kupp, Godwin, Adams, Diggs, Allen, those are all guys that are just on pedigree alone are going to ask for at least 15 to 20 million bucks, whereas Elijah Moore, probably not so much. Kirk was still a Jaguar at the time, but all signs had pointed to him being available, and it turns out he was, and it turns out he's a Texan now. Yay, Payne and Pendergast. Yeah, and
I'll, as far as the injury stuff and concerns, it's not like he's been egregiously injury prone or anything, but he had a couple years in Arizona where he was dealing with things. Then he had a relative stretch of health for 2 seasons when he, his last year in Arizona and then his first year in Jacksonville. Remember, when Jacksonville gave Christian Kirk that deal, they were widely panned for it, and then he came in and had a career year. He had 1,108 yards receiving with 84 receptions. But then since then, it was a combination of injuries, and then 2 years ago, Calvin Ridley was getting more targets.
Yeah.
You get Brian Thomas, who's certainly the guy for the future for the Jaguars the next year, and Christian Kirk got injured again. Getting on a 1-year deal, perhaps with an extension, and only giving up a 7th-round pick. It's widely being regarded by more objective people than you and I as a really good deal for the Texans.
Yeah, what did he get? An A- from Seth Walder on ESPN on the report card? Yeah, so you got an A- on there. And I think I think what we learned, he got paid like a number 1 back when he got the contract in free agency, but I think what we learned is when he's healthy, he's an excellent number 2. And I think he's going to be an excellent complement to what Nico Collins brings to the table. And so we'll see what you got to keep filling that room up though, man. Like you still need bodies in that room right now, let alone capable bodies. So yeah, I'm with you on all that. His injury last year, if I'm not mistaken, was a broken collarbone.
Right.
Which that doesn't concern me as much about like the overall durability. That's bad luck. That's just you got hit, you landed the wrong way. The
year before it was a core muscle injury.
That worries me more.
Core muscle stuff. I go back to Benny Joppru on this stuff. Whenever you have anything from your surrounding your innards, from your groin up to your innards, I get nervous because sometimes that speaks to some kind of biomechanical issue or something. But for whatever it's worth, it wasn't an issue last year. So it's been a couple of injury-riddled seasons for him, but very much upside with Christian Kirk. Plus, wasn't Christian Kirk, I forgot to Google this, he's an Aggie, for those of you who don't know.
Yep.
But he's an Aggie. If I remember correctly, didn't he grow up with a father that really put him to work?
I don't know.
I want to say his father was a businessman of some sort, and Christian Kirk had to basically work at his dad's business and train for football while he was growing up. I'll let listeners do it.
There's several Aggies up listening right now. Text in if that's the case. Text message.
Several. The Aggies are all up at 4:30 a.m. They've already milked the cows
and
taken care of their ailing grandmother. Damn it.
That's right. Jim Adler, the Texas Hammer text line. Disagree, Sean. I don't think we pick up a slot receiver like Ibuka now. That's from Champ Slice. Yeah, I mean, I'm just talking wide receiver in general should not be diminished as a need in the draft. Like they shouldn't start pushing wide receivers down their big board because they signed Christian Kirk. Attack wide receiver with the same ferocity that you were attacking it before this trade.
It might make them feel. I guess if there's one thing we could look at, it's, hey, some offensive coordinators really don't care too much about having a classic slot receiver, whereas other offensive coordinators do. So for whatever Caley's input was into this, it's perhaps a move away from being so heavily focused on lining up with two tight ends or anything else like that. They can be somewhat flexible if they've got a genuine wide slot receiver in there.
You know that what this means too, Seth. This trade, it means that Nick Caserio has now done a trade. I believe this is the first trade ever executed by the Magnificent Gladstone.
The Magnificent Gladstone,
Nick Caserio,
who also released Evan Ingram, by the way.
He did release Evan Ingram, too. Yeah, Nick Caserio was his first.
Yes.
Nick Caserio.
Oh, you always remember your first.
Yeah, man. Nick Caserio was the first for the Magnificent Gladstone executing a trade.
I hope he was gentle. This,
yes.
I would love that Gladstone has done studies on Nick Caserio and the Patriots and the way they operate, and probably looks at as Caserio as kind of that's where I want to be. That's what I want to get to. I like the way he operates.
Yeah.
So what Caserio needs to do now is what Belichick had done with so many of his former proteges, which is really screw him over in a lot of deals. You know, kind of talk him into, almost Jedi mind trick them into like, no, this is a really good deal for you.
It is an angle, though, independent of all the Magnificent Gladstone hoopla that goes on. Okay, we're up against it. I want to bring up an aspect of this trade.
Up against what?
We're up against the clock.
I thought he said he was going to be gentle.
I cannot change the clock. I'm not the Magnificent Gladstone.